Thank you. So here are our panelists. And so what we're going to do is have each of them speak for a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, and then we'll move into, and maybe some tips, and then we will move into the Q&A when you can ask questions, either through chat or the mic, or if you want to be confidential. Sorry. So if you want to go to the next slide, Blake, and take it away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Blake. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a PhD student in biological oceanography at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm in the deep sea fish ecology lab, and I'm an NSF graduate research fellow. So just really briefly, my research interests are in pelagic top predator ecology. I work with different fish like mahi-mahi, wahoo, tuna, and swordfish. And basically, I'm using them to figure out what their like food webs and what their nutritional resources are. And this really ties into biogeochemical nutrient cycling around tropical Pacific islands. So that's what my work is on. And then I just have a couple of like quick little tips. If you're looking to go to grad school, just take your time to find the right research topic and lab. It's really not a race, and you can take your time to make sure you find a good fit. Before you start like looking through labs and programs, I would recommend reading a few papers on any topic that you're interested in, just to get a nice background going for yourself. I would also encourage people to ask mentors to introduce you to scientists they know. Definitely finding out current knowledge gaps from current research scientists is a great way to find a question that you can kind of fill into and then work on in graduate school. Keep an open mind when you're talking to faculty members. I think a lot of times people go in with their own project ideas, but oftentimes you just need to let a faculty member know what your interests are, and they might have a project you would fit well under. I would say work hard and get lots of help on fellowship applications. I think the grad school process is really just a big money game. And if you're able to get a fellowship to have money coming in, that's really only going to work in your favor. And don't get discouraged, never give up. There's a lot of different to your dream career, and lab is going to be really great and beneficial for you, but making sure that you have a good fit and that you're adaptable is really important. So to meet you all, and I'm excited for the panel.
All right. Thank you, Blake. And next up is Elise Mason.
Hi, everyone. Good morning / afternoon. My name is Elise Mason. I use she, her pronouns. I am a recent graduate. I just graduated in May with my master's in environmental science and management. So I took a bit of a different route. I did a non-thesis based master's program. So a bit of a different angle. So some of my research is more work-based. You could just flip this one more slide, please. So I focused my master's program in environmental science and management. Oh, sorry, my track is in policy and management, although I tried to get into the planning track, but I couldn't make it work because I also was able to tie in a community planning graduate certificate and almost a science writing and rhetoric graduate certificate. So a little bit more of an applicable job professional skills. I've labeled myself as a recent graduate / early career professional, and I've put professional in quotes because of just the connotation of what's acceptable in the workplace and how people are able to bring their full selves or not bring their full selves. So that's been a real focus of mine coming out of graduate school. And I'd say for grad school advice, I echo a lot of the same things that Blake said and that Jordan is going to say. So
Elise, we can't hear you suddenly. So we can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Now stop there.
There we are.
Oh, so I'm so sorry. Where did I leave off?
That after grad school that you were interested in the concept of professionalism. After that, cut out.
Okay, yeah. So just being able to combating the notions of what is professional, what's acceptable in a workplace, and professionalism is often about leaving your identity at the door. And so I hesitate to call myself a professional, but I'm working with that and exploring how I can go about that and changing those dynamics in the workforce now. And then I believe that I said that my grad school advice was to find a community and to find people where you can be your full self with, and who also have those connections that can give you that advice on funding opportunities, or, you know, you can just tell them you feel bad one day and they will, you know, just be able to give you that emotional support you need. So academic and emotional support is really important, I felt. And that's it for me. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so next up is Jordan Allen. Go ahead, Jordan.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Jordan Allen, and my pronouns are he and him. My academic journey started at Savannah State University, where I studied environmental science. My next step was going to Colorado State, where I earned a master's in ecology. After I finished my master's, I worked in government as an environmental analyst for the Georgia Department of Transportation for about 3 years. And I'm currently a PhD student at UMass Amherst in the geoscience department, where I'm working towards understanding the production of nitrous oxide gas in subsurface shell environments. Some good advice that I would like to share today is, really think about the career you want to pursue and what skills you need to be successful in your career. Finding a good advisor, seeking external funding, and developing skills that are transferable in your career field. And also, one of the things that I really enjoy is seeking mentorship and mentoring other students.
Thank you, Jordan. Next, Julie Lundquist. Take it away, Julie.
Thanks, Valerie, and thanks for inviting me to be on this panel. I feel like I'm a little bit of an outlier here because I think you've got a lot of great panelists who are currently in grad school and so have very visceral recent experience about what it's like to apply to grad school. But I'm here to be a resource to ask questions about how things seem from the faculty perspective. So I'm a professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences at the University of Colorado Boulder. And I don't know if you guys know that faculty members usually only get paid for 9 months out of the year. So I also have an agreement with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory where they pay my summer salary. And so that means that the research grants that I write can all go to support my graduate students. So when you apply to graduate school, you might be aware that faculty members have to write grants usually to cover their own summer salaries, as well as the salaries of any graduate students working with them. So the more information that you can get about how the money game works when you are applying to graduate school, the better. So that's my perspective. If Jordan, could you advance the slides to pop up the next set of animations? So my interests are in atmospheric science in general, and then I focus on the boundary layer, which is the most shallow part of the atmosphere where we live and breathe. And I do a lot of applications related to wind energy. So that's the cute little picture that you see in the top right corner of wind turbines generating some wakes and clouds downwind. And I also do, or my graduate students do a lot of work with respect to wildfires and wildfire modeling. If you could, next slide, please, thanks. Okay, so when it comes to thinking about graduate school, I think it's really important to recognize that grad school is hard and rewarding at the same time. And so you have to have, that balance of recognizing that, the opportunity to dig deep into some really fascinating questions is a rare opportunity, but there will be challenges. And so you have to love what you're doing to get you through those rough spots. There will be rough spots, unfortunately. That's just kind of part of how it goes. So you've got to have a great topic that you're excited and passionate about. But even more importantly, I think in graduate school, your relationship with your advisor is very critical. And so when you are looking for someone to be your mentor, your research supervisor in graduate school, you should find someone that you can work really well with and communicate well with, because that's very critical. And so even if somebody is not doing a topic that you are super excited about, if you feel like you can mesh with them as a person, that's worth paying attention to. The next thing I wanted to remind people about was to think strategically about your long-term goals. And of course, I know that when you enter graduate school, you don't actually know what you necessarily want to do in the end. But if you do know, then pay attention to that and think about how you should position yourself or what skills you should acquire, what networking connections you should make in order to get you to where you want to go. And a couple of the other people on the panel have already mentioned the importance of networking and meeting lots of people. That's absolutely critical. Get your advisor to send you to conferences so that you can meet people. And no matter how scary it is to walk up to somebody whose name you only know from a research publication, do it, because people generally like to talk to super excited and enthusiastic graduate students about new ideas and things like that. Finally, I have this thing about keeping your tank filled. I think that some people might have this impression that when you're in grad school, you should be very focused on your research or your classes and just get that stuff done. But I think that doesn't pay attention to the fact that we're people. We have multiple dimensions. And Elise, I really like what you said about not wanting to leave all of your identity at the door. I think that if there are activities that, whether that be outreach activities or, tutoring in a school or this or that, even if it's not directly related to your research, you have to do that kind of stuff to keep yourself active and alive and motivated. So I think it's important to go for balance there. And then that kind of culminates in this idea that you have to have work-life balance through grad school. You can't, and I think Jordan said this earlier, that you can't see grad school as a sprint. It's definitely a marathon. And so you're in this for the long haul. And so you need to have a good support network, have, lots of athletic activities or whatever it is that you need to have good balance. Okay, and Blake, if you could advance one more. And there's a book, when I was a graduate advisor in our department, we made sure that we gave this book to all of our incoming first-year graduate students. It's targeted towards the atmospheric sciences, but I think that the advice in general is very good. It's called Navigating Graduate School and Beyond. And the author is a former department chair in an atmospheric science department, and he's very explicit about good strategies and counterproductive strategies in planning your time in graduate school. So go ahead and write down the title of this book, and you can probably find PDFs of it available online. But I think it's a great resource, and it's an hour or two read that you can pursue after this panel is finished. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, and I'm really excited to hear what other people have to say.
Wonderful. And I put the book name in the chat in case you want to just copy and paste, because yeah, thank you. That's a lot of good advice. Thank you, Julie. And so let's see, next we have Nicole. So Nicole, to go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, y'all. I didn't put together a slide, but I am Nicole Nakata. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Oregon, but I'm not in Eugene, which is where the main campus is located. I'm actually in Charleston, Oregon, which is on the coast. I'm a little bit of an oddity on this panel. I'm a biologist, so I'm here at the Marine Station out on the coast. And so my interest is in the larval biology and evolution thereof of marine invertebrates generally, and my dissertation is focused on brittle stars. So they look a lot like sea stars, but they've got even skinnier arms and they move very quickly. That's a good way to identify them. So my dissertation is about the larval forms that we see in that group. So I guess a little bit about my path. I knew I wanted to go this route even when I started undergrad, though there was a lot of uncertainty along the way. So I graduated with BS in ecology, evolutionary biology, and then I did a master's in Los Angeles at Cal State LA, and now I'm here at Oregon doing a PhD. You guys already heard a lot of really great advice about applying to graduate school, so I won't repeat it here, but just know I wholeheartedly agree with everything that's been said. The one kind of nuance maybe I'll point out is that a lot of people have said how, yes, it's a very difficult process and it's a long one, right? Like 5 years is only one more than undergrad, but graduate school is different. So, and it is important to be passionate about your topic to get you through basically the hard times. But what I encourage you all, at least this is based on my experience with many students your age at your stage, it's, you need to figure out the details of what makes you passionate. Because again, I'm a biologist, so I come from a field where a lot of people are like, I love sharks. I'm gonna study sharks for the rest of my life. And it's really easy to love sharks, but do you love the questions you're asking? Is that intellectually motivating for you to keep you reading those papers, doing the analysis? You know, that's a different question from I love sharks. And so I really encourage you all to get into the nitty gritty of the actual work that you would be doing. And so you can do that with things people have already been saying, you know, read papers. Does the paper interest you? Does the methods section, like, you know, the stats? Because at some point that's going to be you doing it and writing it. It's not just diving for sharks. So that's my one piece of advice, is to really examine the things you think you're excited about and make sure that the reality matches what you have in your head.
Thank you. That is such great advice. I've never heard that before. And sometimes, you know, think about what papers or what do you read? What kinds of things do you look up on the internet? And what, if you weren't doing science, what would be your other profession? And then maybe you can blend them. So for me, I wanted to be a doctor or a social worker, but I went into science, and now I'm doing higher education where I get to do some of that people stuff. Are you an introvert, extrovert? Do you want to be outdoors, indoors? Some of those things that, you know, those things matter, the day-to-day job, and how to find what is out there is another question. Okay, thanks, Nicole. Trey, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Trey. My real name is Tremond Thomas Jr., but that always sounds so formal when I say it, I guess. So yes, everybody calls me Trey. Like Elise, I'm actually a recent graduate, but like of my bachelor's degree. I just graduated from Morehouse College with a bachelor's in physics, and I minored in math. So like Julie, I guess I feel like an outlier as well, but like for the opposite reason. So she's like a faculty member, and I feel like I'm like on the other end. Like I haven't entered grad school yet. I was just accepted to an electrical engineering grad program at UTA. So I feel like I'm like barefoot or something. Like I just stepped out of the shoes of undergrad, but I have yet to step into the shoes of graduate school. So I'm like in the middle. So I hope I can offer an interesting perspective when it comes to that. Yes, but I actually think this is great because I'll be listening to this advice as well, since I've yet to go to grad school. But I second everybody's advice that was already given. In addition to, I guess another version of what was already said, just knowing yourself will be really helpful to help plan out what's to come in the future. And it sounds extremely simple, but it's actually an extremely hard thing to like do and be very decisive and try to align things with like who you are. I remember wanting to be an engineer, which I still want to be, but thinking, you know, they're out there and they're like soldering away at things. And then I was told like, well, you know, sometimes or most of the time they do like computer work. And I was like, what? I don't want to like do that like for most of the time. I want to be like actually like building things. So it's just making sure that what job you want to do, that you know actually what it is that they do, you know, because I know being an undergrad, you can just have this, you know, fantastical like way of thinking about your profession. But that's my piece of advice. So hopefully I get some more questions.
Yes, thanks. And yes, congratulations. I think it was just last week, right, that you were accepted?
Yeah, it was just last week.
Yeah, so you have a story to tell there, I'm sure, about that process. That's probably going to be helpful to people. Yes, so thanks so much. And I guess we'll go over to questions and see what people want to ask. Maybe I'll start with one question, but if people would like to, you can enter questions into the chat. If you want it to be anonymous, you could send a question to me in a message, or you can unmic and ask your question. And we love the unmiking, by the way. I guess one question that I have is, how did you identify your graduate program and maybe to go on your point, Trey, how did you figure out what you wanted to do or not wanted to do? But perhaps some of you could speak to this, like how did you identify who might be candidates as an advisor? And then how did you investigate them and get to know them and make a decision? Trace, do you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind. Okay. So you said, how did I pick, was it graduate school, like what candidates did I have, as well as choosing advisors?
Yes, like, I guess how did you go about identifying them? And then did you reach out to them, that kind of thing?
Okay. Yes. So I was very proactive with doing that. I think obviously these schools being in different states, it can be like hard to like have like a well-versed conversation with people, I guess, but actually it's not. You can just like call or you can email them. I've found out a lot about how people emailed me like, and that like sometimes decided whether I'd like to continue on that route. Like honestly, UTA, the school that I got accepted into, I know they had like a reputation for taking care of their students. So I was like, that's huge, because I know personally, knowing myself, again, like you really have to know yourself. I need that like community, I guess, behind me to back me up. I perform better in an environment like that. So I was emailing other schools and emailing UTA, and just how UTA just was responding to my emails, being so nice and kind and stuff. I just like that. So it can be something as simple as that, or like I said, calling them, letting them know your interest or whatnot, and seeing how they respond to it. It can be simple things like that. So I know that's how I started to weed out who I pursue things further with. I know that seems extremely simple, but you can find out a lot. Yeah, of course, a lot about a person by how they interact with you. So that's how I did it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that speaks to, you can ask the graduate students how they feel they're treated by their advisor. But as you say, you can find out right away how that person already is with you. Is it a kind person? Are they going to create a kind culture?
Yeah, and in addition to that, that's a good point. Dr. Yunker from Georgia Tech, he told me, like, ask the graduate students as well as the professor, not just the professor or the PI. Because, I mean, just think about this, like, how I think I teach can be very different, like, perspective from the person that I'm, like, teaching. I can be like, oh, I'm thorough. I get them their space, I do this. And then that person I'm teaching could be like, well, I don't know, he's all over me all the time. It's just different. So you want to ask both and sort of see if they align as well. You don't want to take one for, just for their word. Even the grad students in some cases. I've taken classes where the students are like, oh, he's bad, he gives too much work, this and that. And then I take the guy and he's fine, because so now it was just that grad student's perspective on things, which is different from mine. So I say take both perspectives and then see if they align and see what you think about it.
That's great advice. Do any of the other panelists want to jump in with their story of how they identified their potential advisors?
Sure, I can, because I think it'll be helpful for the REU perspective. I did an REU a couple of years ago. I basically was talking to my research mentor just about what it was that I was interested in and what I wanted to do. And it turns out he had this entire network of people for me to talk to. And I would have had no idea of family members in science or anything. So basically I told him, Nicole, it's so funny when you were talking about the sharks, because that way I was like, I love sharks, I love top predators, whatever. And so I told him that, and he was like, okay, let's give you some papers to read through. And then he emailed and introduced me to a bunch of scientists. So from there, every person I talked to, I was like, what are the knowledge gaps? What are you really interested in? If you had more time, what would you do for a research project? And everyone had this really cool idea about different projects to do. And for me, I kind of found the underlying theme, which was just that people don't really know where the nutrients and the energy comes from that these top predators are utilizing. So for me, that was really interesting, because I got my big, top predator interest filled, as well as a really cool project. So that's kind of how I found what I wanted to do. And I like what Nicole said, it keeps me going, to try to figure those things out. So that also ties into how I found my advisor. Just as the network started branching, people were like, you need to talk to this person and you need to talk to this person. And everyone had someone else to talk to. So I ended up with, I think, 3 professors that I was really interested in. One of them was the one that I have at UH. he was super kind when I was ready to bounce ideas off of him. He totally like read over my research proposals and he was like, this is great, here's some other papers to read, this, that, and the other thing. There was another professor I was talking to, and her response to my email with like, here's a project idea, what do you think, was, I don't have time for this right now. And so for me internally, I was like, oh, well, you know I know I'm just some student that you don't know, but if you're not going to make time to even like consider me, then maybe I don't want to go to your program. And then the third professor, he met with me probably like 2 or 3 times for an hour and a half and really just workshopped ideas with me. And part of my project is isotopes, and I was a biology major in college, so had no idea what that was. And he was just so patient and kind explaining that all to me. And that really meant a lot to me. So I was really between those 2 programs. So I didn't actively like look up pages and like look at programs and all that first. I did that after, when people recommended who to talk to. So I would say lean on your current advisors, whether that's REU, undergrad, whatever it is, just lean on those people because they'll have a lot of advice for you.
Thank you. Jordan, I think this is a really important question. So I'm going to ask for, there are a lot of questions in the chat, but I do want to hear more from more people.
Sure, I would love to kind of share my experience. So I think my experience may be a little different. I took about 4 years off from graduate school. I'm working in government, and I applied through this program called the AGU Bridge Program. This program offers like underrepresented students the opportunity to kind of attend institutions that are looking to help them continue their academic education in geosciences, whether it's a master's program or a PhD program. You kind of create an application and it goes out to a list of institutions who are interested in accepting students. But once you are selected by an institution, you're allowed to kind of interview the schools that are interested in you. So the best advice I can kind of give about, who to work with is first to think about yourself and what you want to accomplish. Some students go for, the big names and the big institutions, but really take some time to kind of think about the environment you will be in for the next 2 to 5 years, depending on if you are pursuing a master's or a PhD. Ask other graduate students about their experiences, ask your potential advisors about their managing styles, and really think about the skills you want to develop. I know for me, for example, for my PhD, I really wanted to, do field work, learn how to code, and really work on like my science communication skills. And I had no coding background. And one of the things that I talked about with my advisor was that something that I wanted to learn. And one of the things that really stood out about our conversation about coding and learning how to model was that even though I didn't have that background, he was willing to really help me develop those skills. And I think that kind of really made me wanted to work with my advisor. So really just think about, the relationship with your advisor, because you're going to spend the next 2 to 5 years with this person, and you really need that relationship to be really good for you to thrive in your program.
Yes, agreed. And, you can find out if professors are hands-on or hands-off. How engaged are they? The old style of mentoring is very hands-off. I met my advisor like every 6 weeks or every month. And I thought that was great until in my current job, I have a boss who I talk to about every other day. And I find that to be way more effective personally. And by the way, the content in the chat, I will save it and share it with you. So don't worry if you're not copying everything down. The questions, there's some good questions to ask advisors that are being put in there, and also where to look for funding. So as I say, I will send that out to your various people. Just before I forget, if everybody, if you could type into the chat your REU, the school that you're at for the REU, just so that I can then see which programs people came from, that would be terrific. Okay, so let's see. So next, I think that's everybody Oh, Elise, did you want to add to anything on this?
I would I would just say that you all provided some very great advice. I think I am the self-proclaimed queen of trial by fire. I ended up at 3 different schools for undergrad. I worked for about 4 or 5 years in between my undergrad and going back for my master's degree. But those experiences, I mean, I worked in an undergraduate neuroscience lab for the majority of the time in between my undergrad and graduate program. And so, can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Sorry, the camera was frozen, so I just wanted to make sure. And so there's definitely, it may save you some trouble and some money to really go and have conversations with people. But at the same time, there is no better experience there's no better teachers than experience. And so I say just, go for it. Ask the questions, yes, talk to the people, make the connections. But if there's something that you feel in your gut is you just want to try it, try it.
I agree. I made huge pros and cons lists for graduate school. And in the end, I chose the one that had, more cons, less money, that kind of thing. But I really wanted to do it. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, and I did reach out to URI to that program. I did much that was Googling, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a PhD program. I had some very insightful people tell me, really don't do it unless you really know that this is what you want to do and this is how you want to do it. Because once you get out of it, it's a very competitive and a very tough field to get into academia as a PhD. And so if it's really not your calling, you will have spent a lot of time and a lot of energy to end up someplace where you're maybe not so happy.
Yeah,
but yeah,
thank you for bringing that up, because yes, I think that one of the shortcomings of the university world is that the way it's set up is that faculty, as much as they would love to share other opportunities with you oh, there are scientists who work in all kinds of places all over the country. They don't have the experience, and so they don't really know what to share. But almost all undergraduates in STEM end up not becoming faculty members, and most grad students end up not becoming faculty members. Some go into research labs. But one tool I just wanted to share in terms of discovering and looking, exploring and seeing what's out there is using the web and typing in, for example, a place you to be interested in working in, like city of Seattle, and a couple of keywords like weather, communication, and then click on the news button on the news tab, and stories pop up that you can read about, oh, there's an issue, or Hurricane Sandy, New York City, news articles. Are people still working on that? And then you can see, oh, you know what? There are people doing science all over the place. And then in those articles, you can find which agencies, which companies, names of people that are quoted. Start looking up those companies and see if it resonates with you. Email those people and ask them about that project or that issue. I think it's sort of like the easiest way to discover that there's a lot of exciting work out there. And a lot of PhD programs will want you to do the PhD, but and it's great to do it, but it's also great to be aware of what else is out there, and also whether you want to stop at a master's or not, or find a program that is a master's program.
Val, can I add on to that really quick?
Please do.
Yeah, so if you are just finding like a name of a person from like an article, or let's say you're just looking up schools and you find someone that's really interesting, when you first email them, it's really hard to get a professor's attention because they get so many emails in a day. So I was given like a nice little packet that has like some good emails and some bad emails, just examples of what might catch a professor's eye. So I can send that out afterwards to all the participants who would be interested. I think just some things that I tried to include, just trying to think off the top of my head, was you should put like maybe some of your past research experiences, what you're really interested in, like research interests are, and make sure you let the professor know how it ties into their work and show that you've done your homework. Like read some of their papers and be like, oh, I read this paper and this paper. I think there's this really interesting central theme of this topic. I'm really interested in that. And like, here's some experience that I've had with that. I have some project ideas. Here's those. Maybe like attach a one-page like CV. Actually, Julie, you might be a great person to ask about like what you look for in those initial emails as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that and kind of laughing to myself because I feel sometimes in August and September and October when I'm getting emails from a lot of potential students that it's unfortunately kind of random if a student's email hits my inbox, like when I'm actually looking at my email, then it's much more likely that I'll be able to read it all the way through, as opposed to if I get it with a big batch of 30 emails between meetings. But the emails that jump out at me are emails where the student briefly introduces themselves, has a sentence or two about why they like the topic, and then somehow show that they didn't just read my webpage for 30 seconds, but dug into it and were aware of some of the papers that we've worked on and some of the current research that my students are working on. If they can mention the name of somebody that they met at a conference who is one of my collaborators or one of my former students, that usually helps. And that's not fair because that's the whole networking game and we should be more broad. But if you have gone to an American Meteorological Society or American Geophysical Union Society or some professional society meeting where you've met someone who's connected to that professor, it's good to drop that name. But showing that you have more than a superficial interest in their work is much more likely to garner a response than just a random, hi, I saw that you do wind energy. That's cool. Can we talk? And if you include a copy of your resume or CV so that I can understand if you are in a position where you've built some skills and want to start to apply them, or if you have not yet built skills but have a lot of passion and enthusiasm and ideas. Just the more information that you can give, the better, without a really long email. So a very succinct email, but maybe with your resume attached, I think would be helpful. I hope that wasn't contradictory information.
Not at all. It's actually really great to have somebody from the other side here saying, what is it like to be a professor getting all these emails and what is helpful? So thank you.
Yeah, because many of us want to be more open, but it's just, a time game because with so many responsibilities, it's hard to keep up with all of the emails from interested students. So anything that you can do to make your email stand out from other people, I think is a good thing.
And there's a question about when, the timeline of when to start preparing personal statements, asking for letters of recommendation, emailing potential mentors. And with regards to the recommendation piece, be sure to cultivate your relationships with the people who are writing your letters or who you hope to have. Make sure you talk to them sort of regularly or send them emails with updates, and even give them material to put in a letter of recommendation, because it's a lot easier. It can take 3 or 4 hours for us to write a letter of recommendation. And Julie wants to add on to that.
Yeah, so I had an undergraduate student working with me a couple years ago who was amazing as far as this goes. So she, talked to me every month or so, letting me know like where she was thinking about applying to grad school. And I gave her, my advice for whatever that was worth. And then when it came time for her to request her letters of recommendation, she sent me a packet, and the packet had her resume. And then it had a letter that basically said, here's school A, here's who I want to work with, here's why I want to work with them. In your letter about me, could you please emphasize, that I worked really hard, or, my field experience or this or that. And then she had school B, here's who I want to work with and here's why. And it was so much fun to write her letters, because a professor will write like one standard letter and then modify things here and there for each potential school. And sorry about the background noise, they're picking up my trash now. But she made it so easy for me to write a personally tailored letter so that I could include, little bits showing that I knew her really well. And if the people reviewing the applications can see a person who's passionate and enthusiastic and willing to work really hard, the easier you can make that job for your letter writers, the better. So, be very clear about where you want to go and why, who you want to work with, and what you want them to emphasize. And please give them more than a couple of days notice, preferably, at least 2 weeks, if not a month notice.
Right.
Yeah. And I'd add that if you ask somebody, a professor or a work person, if they would write you a letter of recommendation and they say no, it is probably in your very best interest to find someone else. You do not want that person who really they either don't know you well enough or they really won't write something that you'd be pleased about. So just don't take it personally. Think of it as a good thing.
Yes, you could even ask them, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation?
If I can add, so I think Julie, I hope I'm using the right analogy, but Julie showed us the ceiling, and I want to talk about the floor. So the absolute worst thing you could do is not communicate with somebody that you are expecting to write a reference letter. I've even gotten requests where the student never reached out to me to say like, hey, I'm applying to this program. Would you write me a letter? I just got a request from that institution with no guidelines. Like I had to remind myself who the student was. And I know this happens to faculty too, right? So the worst thing you can do is not communicate at all, right? Another really bad thing, as Julie mentioned, is to not give proper heads up. But I also find, in addition to the initial ask, I try to do a month before, then also it's not the worst thing in the world to send reminders, particularly if you know the certain faculty are really on it, right? They're very calendar driven, they've got that kind of mindset, but others aren't. And you're just going to do yourself and them a favor by just sending a gentle reminder. Hey, I just want to let you know or remind you that this deadline's coming up. Thank you again so much for agreeing before to do this for me. Here are some of the materials. Again, just make it easy for them.
I agree. And it's really awkward when you get a phone call. I mean, this is more for jobs. You get a phone call out of the blue and the person says, oh, I'm calling to ask you for a reference for this person. And you don't even know what the job is. And then you have to ask, what's the jobs? And then you have to remember so yes, it's all really important to do that. And keeping people updated over years, like your favorite professors from undergrad or from your REU, keep in touch with them, send them a picture of you presenting a poster at a conference or a PDF of your poster, that kind of thing.
Some advice that I was given on letters of rec, also totally agree with everything Nicole said. I sent my advisor's very my undergrad advisor, he's very spacey, and I would send him a reminder email the week before, 4 days before, 2 days before. He would always submit it 30 minutes before the deadline. So yeah, the reminders is helpful, but some advice that I was given is, unfortunately, the name matters a lot. If you work very closely with a graduate student, them submitting a letter is, I was told, not as impactful as the professor's letter. So what you can do is you can have the person that you work with really closely write your letter, and then the professor can co-sign it. And so that's a big name from the professor on your application, but the person who wrote it is the one who works with you really intimately and who knows you very well. Same with your REU program. I was working with a postdoc. He wrote my letter and then the professor co-signed it. So I was told that is impactful when you're applying to fellowships, to graduate school, whatever it is, the name kind of matters.
All right. Let's see. There are a lot of questions in the chat. I just have to go way back up to see them. And also please unmic yourself if you want to ask a question.
Hi. I have a quick question. My name's Emily. I go to a really small school in Tennessee, and I was just going to ask about the fact that I go to a small liberal arts college. I feel like some of my opportunities are lacking for example, my major requirements seem a little bit less intensive than other larger schools. And so I'm wondering if you have advice on classes I should take that aren't required to graduate, but would be beneficial for grad school. adding a physics class, adding more than just general chemistry and such?
Great question. I'm going to put in a plug for statistics. Julie, anybody else?
Yeah, so Emily, I'm not sure what your exact program is. It sounds like you want to go into chemistry, but I think Val's advice that statistics is useful is also good. Any type of programming class, if you're doing geophysics, whether it's Python or Java or MATLAB or whatever, I mean, all languages kind of function the same way, but just showing that you have some prowess in them is a good thing. But don't feel bad coming from a small liberal arts college. I went to a small liberal arts college, and the benefit of that is that your professors know you really well, and they can write excellent letters of recommendation for you. And so I think that I had kind of pivoted in my junior year of college away from liberal arts and towards physics. And so I took a couple more physics classes, and the harder ones and some harder math, and I think an engineering class in fluids or something like that my senior year, when I realized that I was going to go a science route. So I would talk to someone at a potential school that you would like to go to, or one of your research mentors, and get their advice about classes to take. But coming from a big school, you have an advantage of a very broad diversity of classes and the potential for research opportunities in a very wide variety of places. At a small liberal arts school, you have the advantage of really small classes and faculty who know you. And there were 5 physics majors at my school, and there were 5 faculty. So we all got to do research, during the semesters with the faculty members. So use wherever you are, figure out what makes your situation great, and be sure to take advantage of that.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, I agree about the small liberal arts. I mean, you probably know how to write better than a lot of people at other schools, for example, which is really important. Do other panelists have ideas of, like Jordan, maybe you can speak to which courses maybe you did study or you wish you had studied in your time that you were working and not in grad school, so that would have helped you.
Yeah, I think one of the things to add, so if you know the specific program that you're thinking about applying for, you can always research on their website, what are their prerequisites for getting into the program, or what are the courses that, students who do get accepted in the program will have to take. And you can kind of utilize that information to kind of make a decision on what type of courses you can still potentially take at, your liberal arts institution, or maybe at another institution, as far as like a gap year.
Mhm. Elise, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I did my undergraduate in biology as well as a few of you. And then I applied to a master's program in environmental science. It's actually much different than it sounds. So I didn't have a lot of the prerequisites that some of the classes that I took, like for instance, last semester I took a soils class. And that was something that I just didn't really understand that well, but I knew, how to navigate it. And I talked to my professors and I said, listen, I don't have this, that, the third. Is it okay that, am I going to be able to even get into these classes, or do I need to take something? So that is important to be aware of. So I would definitely make sure that once you do nail down the program that you're interested in, to talk to somebody who's really knowledgeable about the coursework and the prerequisite courses. And they may say, we can waive that. I had so many prerequisites waived. It may have made a few of my classes harder, but it's doable and it's possible. So as long as you put in the work, it's fine.
And I want to say something that Elise and I heard the other day from a professor at Savannah State, Breon Hoskins Brown, I think her name is. She said, people will not pursue something because they think they can't do the math or the programming or whatever. And so she was saying, like, just, you are able. So if you really want to work in that field and you need these skills, you are most likely able to do it. And don't tell yourself that you can't. Or maybe it's a little painful at the outset, but then, like, for example, math and programming are now being used in a lot of different STEM fields. and it allows people to do pretty exciting work with models, with data, with satellite data, with other data. So even though it might seem like a big hurdle or very unappealing, consider doing it if that's what you really want to do, is if you think you want to really get into that field. If anybody wants to add to that, please do.
Yeah, go ahead, Trey.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. So let me first clarify that I had the incredible privilege of being able to go take a summer course in my subject area that I was really interested in. So, right, I think you can imagine not a lot of people study larval invertebrates. So I was able to go take a class at yet another marine station. And that's actually where I met my advisor. He was teaching the course, my current advisor. But I was only able to do that because, first of all, they offered some scholarships that covered about half the fees. And during that time, I was living at home doing a master's and working. So I had saved up some money to pay the remainder of it. And I just want to put that out there that that's not available to everyone. But if it is an option, either through scholarships or your own savings to do, it can give some of the benefits of like going to a conference, because I met all these people in my field, all the other larval weirdos who love the same stuff I loved, And so not only did I gain the course content, that knowledge, but I also expanded my network. And so that was a slightly different from what you were asking, Emily, in terms of coursework, but you could think of other opportunities that could be gotten by taking additional classes, maybe in a different place as well, not just, I don't have enough physics credits, that kind of thing. There's many aspects to those sort of experiences that you should open yourself up to if you can.
Trey, thank you, Nicole. And thanks for pointing out about the privilege piece too, about, can you pull it off?
Yeah, so I since I guess I have like really recent experience with having to apply, and then coming from Morehouse, a small liberal arts college, I recognize that the rigor at some of these larger institutions might be more than what I've experienced at Morehouse. So there'd probably be a gap when I went there. There might be. I'd say I had to reach out to the grad professors and see, and like you said, online, they have the prerequisites. I also reached out to them, and if they're nice enough, they say, send me your transcript so I can see what classes you've taken, the grades you've gotten in them, and then tell you what you probably need to take if you like come here or whatnot. And that also helped me sort of weed out some grad schools that I didn't go to and the ones that I do, because some of them, it's like the prereqs, so there's a lot of them. And it's like, that'll add like 2 years to my program if I took that. So opposed to someone else who's like, you only need like 3 or 4, I guess, or something like that. So that helped me weed some things out. But I'd also say, know what you do know really well, right? It's most of the time that stuff like builds off of each other, especially some of the math concepts or whatnot. So I'd say know what you do know really well. From one grad mentor of mine, said like the alphabet, like knowing it like the alphabet. Like these are things you just have to know. Because I know sometimes in undergrad, you take these classes, at least in my experience, and you don't know what to remember. Like you do well in the class, but you don't know what to latch onto and carry the concept over, right? Because you have, while you're in the class, you have the hard version of the problems. And they're good to like know how to do. But just remember the concept and carry that on with you, and you'll do like better that way. So that, I guess that's my advice.
Thank you. Here's a question. What are the pros and cons of applying to grad school straight out of college versus taking time after college, maybe working presumably for a while?
Can I answer that?
You sure can.
Only because, again, like it's very recent. And like my decision, it was not like seamless either, right? Because you graduate college, or like your undergrad, and you're like, oh my God, like I can get a job. Like I can actually get a job and be like relatively like fine, I'm like, at least in my case, like, oh, I'm single, I have no kids. Like I can get a job. Like I can like be fine, especially with whatever like salary that I get with this physics degree. So at that point, I was always like, I'm going to go straight through, because I was fortunate enough to receive the Gates Millennium Scholarship. So it pays for like my master's and my PhD. So I was like, I have to go like straight through. But then I'm like met with this like thing of like, oh, I can actually get a job now and take my time. So I would say it was difficult to decide ultimately to go to grad school, at least like immediately after your undergrad. I would say a con is, I'd argue that most of the time coming straight out of grad, you don't have a really good grasp, I think, on what it is you really want to do. So like take, so like it's okay to take your time. And you have this misconception, at least I did when I graduated. It's like, oh, I got to go straight through. No, and it's like, you're young, you have time. You have to, what's a year off of work? You'll be like, what, 23, 24? I'll be like 23 next year. It's like, come on, what do you have to lose? And then then you have ample time to really dig into the research of what like grad schools you want to go to. You have like a whole year, to brush up on some MATLAB or something like that. Like, take your time. And I know when you're young, and like I said, when I was applying, I felt like I didn't have time, that if I took a year off, I was wasting time. And it's just, that's just like not the case. It's just not the case.
Right. And people, you will say, but then you'll never go back. Like, that's a travesty, right? But maybe that's okay. I personally took a couple of years off between, and it helped me decide that I wanted to go back to graduate school. I did a master's, and then I took a couple of years off. Jordan did the same. What do you think?
Yeah, I just think it's personally about, like you said, like just really, taking your time and like learning yourself, learning the things that, make you happy, thinking about the stages of life that you're currently in, what are some of the goals that you want to accomplish? Like, really just take some time to really think about those things, because, life is hard for everyone, and everyone is kind of going through something. So you really have to decide, what steps, what sacrifices you want to make to kind of make your dreams come true. So my advice would kind of be, take your time. I would say some of the pros of doing that kind of allows you to, I know now going into my PhD program, I'm a lot more focused. I'm a lot more specific on like the research topic that I'm focusing on. I'm a lot more organized. So it kind of really gave me the opportunity to kind of really just be more focused on what I really wanted to accomplish. And I think everybody's situation different. I had one of my friends that I went to undergrad they went straight through. They had a PhD at 27, but that situation really worked for them. So really just figure out what works for you, and it's okay, however long it takes, just do what you feel is best for you.
Thank you, Jordan. That's reassuring. Julie?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Jordan and Trey have said about, the importance of figuring out what is right for you. And, you may get some pressure from the people around you to say, oh, no, you need to go to grad school right away, but it may not be the right path for you. However, if you do decide to go to grad school eventually, but not right after undergrad, please, please, please tell your professors that that's what you're doing, and ask them to write you a letter now, while they still remember you and all these, wonderful details are still fresh in their mind. I had one of my students who I knew, she graduated this year. I know she's not going to grad school this year, but I begged her to apply to a school that didn't have an application fee, just to make me write the letter, so that when she actually needs it in 2 or 3 years, I have a great letter with lots of details that I can just modify in a couple of years. So it's important to take the time off and figure out the right path for you. And then, professors tend to see applicants who have worked for a few years as people who are more serious and more focused and more dedicated, because you're not, still exploring lots of different options. You've probably figured out what you want to do, and you're here in grad school to do this specific thing, and that's great. So there's a little bit of a perspective from the faculty that you can use to your advantage if you're coming back after a couple of years of working. But also remember not to enjoy if you're working in industry for those couple of years, don't spend your entire salary. Keep yourself adjusted to living as a student, and just save all of that money and act like it doesn't exist, because it's really, really hard. I've seen some of my students do this. It's hard to go from, making, a relatively large amount of money back down to the graduate student salary. So if you can continue living as a student while you're actually making money, and save that, or use it to support your family, or do something so that you're not spending a lot of money, that will make the transition back to graduate school easier. Have we talked about that people should normally get paid to go to graduate school in STEM? Have we said that explicitly here?
Yeah.
No, but that is a great point because I did not think this through. Well, not that I didn't think it through. I'm very grateful that I'm very glad with my master's degree. But I had to scrap and scrape and beg for money, and I still do. And the graduate school pay for me was a pay bump from what I was doing. So yeah, so it's very hard to make those decisions. So it really is important if you are in a position, if you're privileged enough to really, and I have family support for financials, like that was also something that I was privileged to have. So I made it work, but that is a really big piece of your decision making. So, I mean, as terrible as it is to base your decisions based off of what, I just don't think I'm going to be able to swing it because I won't have the money. Somebody will help you. And if you say, listen, I'm here and I'm very passionate about this program, but help, like I have to have the financial support to do it. Be clear about it.
Yes. It's different in the social sciences. There is much less funding.
It looks like there's a couple questions in the chat that a couple people wanted answers to, which is, if you're graduating in the fall semester, would you recommend waiting until next fall to apply for grad school, or go ahead and apply for the spring? And then, yeah, so I guess I went straight from undergrad to graduate school. Something to think about is that the grad school process takes a long time. That's, reading background papers, talking to people, trying to develop your project, applying to fellowships. It starts really quickly. And I was doing that all my senior year when I was taking 5 classes a semester. So it was extremely difficult and it took a lot of time. So honestly, I think, like, for me, it was manageable, but it was really difficult. And I would say you need to take a gap year just to, like, do all that and really dedicate your full time and energy to it. Please do that. Like, it'll be so good for your mental health and for your physical well-being. For me, it was just like I put my classes on hold to do graduate school, and that's probably not something I should have done. But for the folks that are graduating this fall, it kind of depends on the program if you should apply for spring, because some places have spring admission and then some just have one cycle for the year. It depends if there's rolling admission or not. So I guess it's, yourself best, but my advice would be maybe like take some time really to like go through that process and kind of figure out where you want to go and do your homework and kind of think all. But if you want to just go gung-ho and go for it, like, I'd say that's something you can totally do as well, up to the individual completely. But a lot of places, I would say, reaching out maybe in like June or like late spring to professors might be a good idea. And then you can start working on your fellowship applications and stuff maybe in like August, and then start going from there. So that's the traditional timeline. But if you're graduating in fall, I'm not sure what the timeline for spring looks like.
Right.
I think that Blake's advice about thinking about your graduate program is really important. Like my department's graduate program, we very rarely accept students to start in the spring because so many of our initial graduate classes build on each other. So you can't really take the spring dynamics class until you've taken the fall one before then. So only for really exceptional cases of students that we've had existing relationships with, only those students do we accept for spring admissions. And so I put this in the chat, but if you graduate in the fall, sometimes there are undergraduate fellowships that let you do research even after you've graduated, that can pay you a decent salary, give you a leg up on research to help your application for graduate school. And you can do those in the spring or in the summer to help with fall admissions, things like that.
Also, I just mentioned you might want to take a mental health break from being in school. As Blake says, like, the senior year is intense anyhow. I mean, again, it depends on your situation and on the person, but having a break from all the pressure is a good thing. Can be.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a atmospheric science and meteorology major who will be graduating after this year. And I know that I want to go to grad school, but I'm not entirely sure what I want to study and if I want to go for like GIS or meteorology or what. And I was wondering if you guys had any recommendations on like how to figure out what it is that I want to study. I think that the best advice is to try to find a program where you can do a little bit of that work. Maybe a summer internship or a volunteer project where you can do a little bit of GIS stuff, so you can be like, "Whoa, this is awesome! This rocks my world," or "Oh my gosh, I'm going to pull my hair out doing this, and this is not exactly what I want to do." So I think Nicole, you talked about that with, do you like the idea of sharks or do you like actually doing the work with sharks? So yeah, exactly as Nicole said in the chat, get your hands dirty and try to do a little bit of that work. Find somebody at your university or somebody in your REU who does something related to what you think you might want to do, and try it and see if it lights your fire or if it feels like drudgery. And that's a really good thing to pay attention to.
Thank you. Another idea is, without necessarily looking at, say, oceanography departments or atmospheric departments, instead to look up topics again that interest you and maybe graduate programs. So for example, maybe medicine and epidemiology and geography appeal to you. Maybe you want to study the movement of some virus or something. Look it up and see what programs are out there and see what appeals to you. If you like what you're reading about GIS and you want to see, oh, how can I use GIS with epidemiology, for example, and geography? Use the web a lot and see what appeals to you and maybe what's not appealing to you. Like Julie says, like try to identify what's also not appealing to you. One tip that comes from the book, the books that people write about figuring out what you want to do, is like, what color is your parachute is one of them. Is if the work feels meaningful, people are generally happier. If they feel like it's useless, they don't feel very satisfied. And I can tell you that I love my work now because I work with people, I work with you, and I find it very, very rewarding. So it feels worthwhile to me. So that's just something to consider as well.
And I just wanted to add, somebody has mentioned asking, oh my gosh, I forgot what I was going to say actually. But basically, try and hold informal interviews. I was like, for instance, I said, well, I think I'm interested in studying city planning, but I'm not exactly sure what a city planner really does. And so one of my advisors said, okay, this is the name of somebody who just recently graduated from this program. She also did a similar track to you. Call her and see what she does. And so, she said she spends a lot of time at her desk. She does this, that, and I was like, oh, that's not what I want to do. So, you have an idea. You may not know exactly what you want to do, but when you hear other people talk about their work, it sometimes will jog ideas or memories or inspiration. So.
That is a great idea. And it doesn't have to be academics. It could be, if you find them through that news tab and you find articles about topics of interest to you, you can try to talk to those people and say, email them and say, I'm trying to figure out what to do in grad school. Could we chat sometime so I could ask you about the work, the project, your day-to-day life as a city planner or a water resources manager, for example. So the informal interviews, they're super helpful to figure out, is this a good match or not? Yes, as Elise says, people do like to talk about what they do and about themselves. What about fellowship, the process of applying to grad school and applying to fellowships? There was a question about that, which we've touched on a bit, but does anybody want to address that a little bit more?
Sure, I just have like an initial thought, which is that I guess if you didn't know any better, graduate school applications are not like undergraduate applications. Like for undergrad, you apply to all these schools and, you know, people sit down and they review your applications. And they're like, you're in, you're not, you know, wait list, whatever. That's kind of not how graduate school works. It's kind of this more like, it's almost like speed dating. If, if that's a good analogy, it's like you email these professors, you reach out and you say, hey, like, are you like, this is me, like, are you interested? Could we talk? And then sometimes they'll say, yeah, and you'll speed date back and forth. You'll have a couple meetings. If all goes well, they'll invite you to meet the family. They'll say, come to a lab meeting and like, you can meet all my students. And it just kind of goes from there. And then they say, okay, interested in you and I'd like you to apply to the program. And then there's like an admissions committee, and then they go through and they kind of pick and choose, you know, who they want to admit as their students for the next year. So instead of just applying to, you haven't talked to anyone beforehand, you're not going to get in because you're just a name in a list of applications of people who have probably talked to these professors. So that was some advice that I got, was like, really make sure you're taking the time to date these professors and like see what's a good fit for you and for them. And if all goes well, you know, hopefully they'll admit you to the program. Something else that I wish I had known beforehand is it's all a money game. So basically, when you're a graduate student, you get paid a salary. And usually either the school or your professor is responsible for paying that. So a lot of times you'll email these professors and you'll say, hey, I'm really interested, you know, whatever. And then they respond and they say, you seem great. I would really love to take you on, but I don't have funding for you this year. That is a response that I got so many times. And it's just, graduate school is such a serendipitous process. It might just be that your professor that you're reaching out to just got this awesome grant and is looking for a new graduate student and you're a perfect fit. Or you email them and they say, hey, I don't have funding for you right now, but you seem great and I think we'd be a good match, but I don't have funding for you. So that's where these fellowships come in, is if you're able to apply to these fellowships and then reach out to a professor and say, hey, I have my first year of funding covered. Would you entertain taking me and maybe we could work on some grant applications later? So I don't know, that's where the NSF fellowship comes in like really well, is you don't need to dedicate that fellowship to any school, you can take it anywhere. And that's through funding. So if you have that, pretty much good to go, as long as as long as you're vibing with each other, you know? So it's a big money game. It's basically like dating. I don't really know what else to say. It's a huge process and there's a lot of moving pieces, but yeah.
Thanks.
Nicole.
So I think you're talking about the GRFP, right? Being that graduate. So definitely look into that if you've never heard of it before. But one word of caution that I wasn't aware of when I started my graduate work was that you have to be young in graduate years to apply. And so therefore I was seeking funding when I was applying to PhD programs so I could kind of write my own ticket because I knew who I wanted to work with, but it was a matter of them not having funding. But the problem I ran into is because I had done a master's, I was too old in graduate years to be eligible to apply, which was just, you know, I can't go back in time. There was nothing I could do about it at that point. And I was just simply unaware that that was a limitation. So keep that in mind. I know a lot of you have been asking master's versus PhD. This is such a small part of that decision, but it is something that came up for me.
So if you are looking at master's programs, if you are not a good test taker, for instance, I only applied to URI's program. Actually, I did talk to a few other people, but I only applied to one. But they waived their waived their requirement for their GRE. I took the GRE twice, and I did very poorly both times. I know I'm a very smart person, but I am not good at 4-hour tests where you can't take your shoes off. So that is something to consider as well. And there are more and more schools that are now dropping that requirement because they understand that testing and standardized testing is not really the best way to gauge, you know, their best students.
Thanks. There's some good questions in the chat too about what about LinkedIn? How do you network? And LinkedIn, you know, nowadays, I mean, people will Google your name. So if you have a LinkedIn profile, that's terrific because then they see that you are that professional. You put down your schools. It's super easy to fill it out. They make it very easy. They'll even help, it even helps you write a summary. Put in a photo, it makes it much more likely that people will look at it in the networking. Put in a banner photo perhaps. Also you can upload things like PDFs of posters or your resume or CV if you like, other materials or that kind of thing that people can see the work that you've done. Somebody asked about COVID and how that is affecting. Oh yeah, so that's right. Blake mentions that tomorrow we have a workshop on career exploration and networking. We can send that link out to you if you're welcome to join it. It's I think it's at 1 o'clock Mountain Time. Is that right? There's a question about COVID and the impacts. Julie, maybe you could talk about that. And if anybody else wants to join in, how has COVID affected the timing of things this year?
So in terms of affecting this year, I don't think, well, unless there's like a big rebound with the Delta variant and that kind of stuff, I'm hoping that COVID won't affect admissions too much this year. But I know that for last year's class, usually you apply to grad school in the fall, deadlines are December 1 or January 1, somewhere in there. Usually by February or March, graduate departments have made their decisions about their first cut of candidates who they want to accept. And then if the departments have funds to bring students out to visit, usually in February or March, there are student visits where you and the other people who are accepted get to come and like see the school, meet the faculty, meet grad students. And this is where you find out like what the faculty are really like by talking to their graduate students. So this year, our class couldn't do that visit to either our program or the other programs that they were accepted to. So they had to make decisions kind of without ever actually being physically on site. And that was tough for them, but we still had students accept and come. So I'm not sure that COVID is actually going to affect the application process as much as it could potentially affect your decision-making process next year if you can't actually visit the place that you want to go to. I don't know if that fully answers the question, or other people might have other insights to share. Our program has already gotten rid of the GRE requirement, and Elise, I think you made a very good point that that test is a test of some things that are not related to graduate school success, and so I think a lot of programs will be eliminating it going forward.
Yeah, I actually did get yelled at for taking my shoes off. Not yelled at, but she told me, "I'm sorry, you have to put your shoes back on." And I said, "Are you serious?" Side note.
And are there any other I guess we're wrapping up on time soon. So I was thinking maybe that while people, if they want to add more questions in the chat, and panelists, if you have thoughts that you want to, re-emphasize or new points to make, please go ahead.
I have one, and it kind of goes back to Emily's question like a little bit ago. Imposter syndrome is probably one of the worst things that has ever existed, and I don't think it ever needed to be in the first place. Like, we all are just kind of figuring out what we're doing, especially with grad school, and there's no reason to feel unprepared. There's no reason to feel that you are less than another applicant. There's no reason for that. I think a lot of it's just, timing and what works out, but like, we're all just doing our best, and we're all still learning. So don't ever feel like you are not equipped to do something. Like, you can always learn, you can always take classes, you can always get experience with different things. So like, even if you apply the first round for grad school and you don't get in, don't get discouraged, because it's nothing you're doing wrong. There's just things that you can improve on. So I just wanted to make that point. I went to Berkeley as an undergrad, and like, let me tell you, I never felt smart. I never felt good enough, or felt anything. And it all works. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do to better yourself and to keep moving forward. So just make that point. Like, this whole process is hard, but never feel like you're not good enough.
And also think about, if you feel particularly like an imposter, that it's also the environment. It's not necessarily the most welcoming always. And people with different identities don't necessarily feel like they're comfortable or able to be their authentic selves within the context of the university world of science. And so finding communities that are supportive, that you can connect with is helpful. And being aware that I guess I like to call it the imposter environment, because there is a piece of it that is also this sort of cultural norm in science, which came from a European male white property owning culture. And so, we're sort of always trying to fit in, whether you're female or person of color or gay or whatever, there is that disconnect. So I don't know if any of the panelists, Elise or anybody, wants to add on to that.
Yeah, let me formulate my thoughts here. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak up. I need to kind of think about this actually a little bit. I don't want to take up too much time if somebody has something else to say.
Yeah, I can say a few things. To revisit our analogy of finding an advisor being like dating. In the same way, I'm finding that just like your romantic partner can't be your only social interaction, right? You have your family, you have your friends. Similarly, your academic advisor is not going to be the be all end all of who's going to help you get through this degree. And so I encourage you to not find an advisor and just stop. Keep seeking out, or maybe as part of your decision-making process, go to institutions where there's more than one faculty person with whom you identify personally, intellectually, because they're going to create a community around you. And then if you have to create a committee, like an actual committee, the people who pass you and say, like, here's the stamp of approval, you get this degree, you can ask those people to be on your committee, and you're going to formalize that relationship you have with them, so you can rely on them, say, for their expertise in a particular program or methodology, so it doesn't stop with your advisor, is all I would say. So never stop looking to make connections, to ask for help, because there's a whole community of scientists there who might be able to lend a hand.
Yep, that jogs my memory. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, no.
Thank you for saying that, Nicole. I guess I'll just reiterate my piece of grad advice, which is basically what you're saying, is to find a community. And I went into grad school into, as Val was saying, a very white program. I was the only Black woman that I know of within my program. And it was a really small program. And so there were pieces of me that I did not know that I needed support for. And there was a group that didn't know how to give that to me. And so I had to seek out other assistance, and I had to find it with multiple people. And they're there and they are willing to help. I think Jordan was saying, be a mentor and be willing to mentor too, as more than you think you do. And so don't think that everyone is there to teach you. You can also teach other people as you go through your grad program as well.
Yes, in fact, I remember when Jordan first went to graduate school for his master's program, in his first semester, of his own volition, he gave a talk for the undergraduates called How to Apply to Grad School. I think that's really great. And he also went back to his high school and gave a talk about how to be an excellent student. And he set up a mentoring program there that he still keeps going. So these are really, it's true. You have a lot to offer, and giving back is actually something that people will value on your resume and CV. It's not all about the technical. It's like, what kind of a leader, what kind of a person are you? Do you give back? Do you go above and beyond? Do you care about people? Have you got teaching experience? Things like that. I put in the chat along these lines of what Nicole and Elise were talking about, a link to the Earth Science Women's Network mentor mapping activity. And you can see in there's different kinds of mentors that we have, and it might be accountability, people that hold us accountable, like, is this really what you want to be doing? Could be emotional safety, friends, a minister or somebody, and who is going to advocate for you academically? Who are your intellectual peers? That kind of thing. So you can identify where you can fill that out and see, where do I have gaps? oh, I really need to find, let's say, a woman who works in this field who's more advanced than me, who can give me guidance. You know, you can seek out people who you identify with in different ways than your advisor. And it's really a good point. Don't expect your supervisor to be your grad advisor to be everything. They're not. They're just your. And Julie, you might want to add to that.
No matter how wonderful your advisor is trying to be, human beings just cannot fulfill every requirement that you have. And I like how Nicole compared this to your romantic partner. You can't get everything that you need from one person. And so, you know, your advisor can give you some intellectual stuff, but make sure that you have a network of other support people. Someone had, I forget who had mentioned that, you know, you should find other people to be on your committee, either your master's or your PhD committee. And I always encourage my students to choose people who might have job openings that they would want to apply for later, so that they have an opportunity to get to know them and, you know, treat your committee as kind of an extended job interview. But yeah, the Earth Science Women's Network mentor mapping activity is really, really good. And it's good to think explicitly about kind of our informal support networks. And I like that activity for that reason.
Yeah, and I know that when I did it a year or two ago, I found that I had maybe like 2 people filling all these boxes. And it's like, there's something wrong there. I need to, you know, expand who I rely on. Well, just being mindful of time, since it's 11:30, are there any other thoughts, questions, or panel thoughts?
I think one thing I kind of wanted to add, or 2 things. If you're thinking about graduate school, really learn the metrics you will be judged by. For example, as graduate students, you know, we're really judged by, you know, publications, science communication, getting funding, and developing skills that will, you know, help us, you know, transition in our careers. So really be strategic with your time. And I just want to reiterate, you know, the skills that you wanted to develop as a graduate student. And, you know, think about what type of career you want to have and what skills you need to be successful. You want to get the most out of your graduate school experience.
Thank you. And as I said before, be confident that you can get those skills. So we have an offer from Julie with her email. Contact her if you have follow-up questions. Blake has in the chat shared his materials about grad school and scholarship applications and offered to meet up one-on-one and put his email address. Elise has put hers, and I will.
Blake, may we share these resources with students not on this call? Great.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's open. If you have the link, anyone should be able to see it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, and so we have 34 people who've signed up on the Google Sheet, so we can send you directly the materials. So thank you so much, panelists, for your time and effort and advice and sharing. It's really kind of exciting and insightful to hear from so many people with different experiences, different perspectives. And thanks to all of you who participated for your excellent questions and for taking the time to be here. We wish you the very, very best in whatever you do, whatever you pursue, and we wholeheartedly cheer you on and encourage you to follow your heart.